Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World. I'm your host, as always, Kane Sims. And if you haven't got your Unpass tickets yet, ladies and gentlemen, you do need to do that pretty quickly. The early bird offer is now over, I'm sad to say. We've increased the prices ever so slightly due to the inevitable demand for the conference. The prices are not full price yet for the passes, but they have gone up ever so slightly. If you get in touch with VoiceFlow, though, however, our platinum sponsor, they do have a cheeky little code, I don't mind mentioning, that will bring that price back down to early bird levels, but you would need to reach out to VoiceFlow for that. Shout out to VoiceFlow for being our platinum sponsors. Shout out to Raza for being sponsors, Quick for being sponsors, Radiant AI. We're doing some tremendous stuff. Unpars, if you don't know, I'm talking as if you just know about it. You should know about it by now. It is the leading AI conference, certainly in the UK, definitely in Europe, and arguably perhaps even across the world when it comes to creating and deploying conversational AI systems. All of the practitioners, the who's who, the faces that you may or may not know will be there sharing the best practice, insights, lessons learned, case studies and all that kind of stuff. It's on the 17th to the 19th of June and you do not want to miss it. The venue is fantastic, Museum of London, and we are going to have an absolutely amazing time. 3 parties. I don't know why I'm doing 4 because there's actually 3 parties, and it's going to be immense. We've got an awards ceremony, we've got a hackathon, we've got workshops, we've got immense keynotes and content, we've got interactive sessions, you name it. It will teach you what you need to know to deploy large language models effectively, to design conversational interfaces effectively, and to create and productionize conversational AI. So get yourself to unparsconf.com. All right. Now, my guest today is, I would say, a legend. I've had loads of legends on in the last few weeks. Chris Ezekiel, who is the founder and CEO of Creative Virtual. Creative Virtual is, I want to say, maybe the longest standing conversational AI platform in the world. If it's not, it's definitely one of them. Chris has been running it for the last 21 years with a wealth of knowledge and experience. Chris, welcome to VUX World, and thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kane. Very excited to be here. Don't often get called a legend, if ever. But a veteran in the space, no doubt. Yeah, this is our 21st year, and thanks very much for inviting me along.
No worries. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate it. Yeah, I know you're a busy guy. 21 years in this business is no small feat. You know, the average lifespan of a startup is about 2 years, especially in this space where it's a very crowded market now. Lots of new entrants, lots of funding being pumped into it. You know, lots of attention given the relative newness of or at least the new interest in generative AI. So standing the test of time for 21 years is no mean feat, is it?
Thank you. And it's probably worth saying that we've actually done this with an incredible team of people. And I say that because having an incredible team of people has meant that we've been able to do this without any investment, actually.
Wow.
And we've become a global player, seen as one of the leaders in the field, and which I'm very excited to say, and also, supporting over 40 languages today with the technology, and in all sorts of spaces, not just the conversational AI for customer experience, but employee, agent assist, everything. And I think the other interesting area, which I'm sure we'll get onto, is seeing some of the use cases around the sales area. For these systems as well, sales assistants, product experts, that type of thing. So we've done it a bit unusually, I guess, as a tech company, growing it organically from our profits. But that's only been possible because of the fantastic team that we have, very dedicated to delivering great solutions for our customers.
Yeah, I mean, to do it without funding is very impressive. I suppose you had an early head start. And so I imagine that potentially played a bit of a role in terms of if you were one of the first out there to market, any demand that was happening then was being served by very few people or companies. And therefore, was it a case that you were able to, in them kind of early years, build that kind of runway and establish that kind of like stability, or not? Did it pan out differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. And there's, I mean, inevitably you draw a lot of parallels between the then and now, and is it new? Some of the stuff that we see today, or is it just something that's built on what's been there before? But I remember in the early days, in fact, one of the things that we're very proud of as well is that our first customer, one of our first enterprise level customers, we mostly operate at the large enterprise level today with our platform and the services that we bring around that. And most of our sales are through partners today. This is how we've kind of grown as a company. Have a strong global partner network. But it's quite interesting. One of the parallels I think is worth drawing early on, in terms of lessons that we've learned along the way, is that I remember, so Lloyds Banking Group here in the UK was one of our first customers, and I'm very proud to say that that's still a customer today. And we're in their contact center supporting people vulnerable customers, people that have experienced fraud. They're people that support the ATM machines, so various different implementations, commercial banking, as well as some of the mortgage stuff we do. In fact, I was with their mortgage team, their how-to team, just yesterday in Gloucester, having a quarterly meeting with them. So they've been a long-term customer. Of course, many people have changed.
Which company was that? Sorry.
Lloyds Banking Group.
All right, cool.
Group here in the UK. Yeah. So, and I remember those early days, 20 years ago, where these systems were rule-based natural language processing systems, and we still retain actually that capability to override the AI, the large language models, where that's needed. But I remember one of the actually it was another banking customer around that time. I don't know if people in the UK may remember Kahoot. Right. I think it was part of the Abbey National Group, which is part of Santander now. And we were just about to go live. And this has got a lot of parallels with where we are today with the large language models. Just about to go live, and their compliance team came in and said, well, hang on a minute. This system that you've developed that's going to help our customers answer their questions instantly without involving people from this company, Creative Virtual. The issue we've got with it is that how can we tell that in these particular instances it's going to give the right answer? So we developed a whole regression testing system to the platform that enabled you to kind of put in alternate questions, and it was a test system of all of the kind of inputs testing against the intents. I guess we didn't call them intents at the time, but those matching the intents to the relevant answer or conversation. It was conversational even at that point, and we made that an automated system, and we still have that in place today for the rule-based system. But what we've done now as a company is put those similar, not the same, I'd say similar type of controls, guardrails, if you want to call them that. I know that's a term that's used very much in the industry, around the large language models to give the enterprises the confidence. And we can talk about where people are with the implementation of generative AI today, of course, but it's those controls that we're similar type of controls that we put back in 20 years ago around rule-based natural language processing. We're now putting around the AI. So there's parallels, different approaches, but certainly a lot of parallels that we see. And actually, you talk about those early successes. The reason we were successful is because no one was. I guess that was called chatbots then. I mean, we use the terms chatbots, virtual assistants, virtual agents, virtual customer assistants, conversational AI. It's all changed over the years. We use those terms interchangeably as a company. I think mostly it's settled on conversational AI today. And maybe we should talk about what that exactly means, because that does mean different things, different people sometimes. I'm sure, Kane, you're well aware and hear lots about. But the reason for our success was we was able to really tune in to what the large enterprises needed to have from a control, a compliance, a regulatory framework perspective for deploying chatbots, as they was called back in the day. So we're very experienced, very knowledgeable about what it took to do that then, and this is what we're doing now with generative AI. Similar, very similar experience.
Yeah, I think the nomenclature around conversational AI is a mad one, like, because yes, it was chatbot, and then it was virtual assistants, and then conversational AI, and now it's AI agents or LLM agents, and it's kind of like, it all means the same thing basically, doesn't it? It's natural language interfaces fundamentally at the end of the day that sometimes uses natural language, sometimes actually doesn't. Perhaps it might be better sometimes to not use natural language and use something that's proven, like a date picker for selecting dates or something like that, like. So it's all kind of interface design at the end of the day, I suppose. But you mentioned there that, you were kind of working on the testing elements earlier on, and there's even platforms today that still don't have that good testing capabilities, which is crazy, and third parties that have popped up that kind of fill that gap. And so with that, I'm assuming you're meaning things like, unit testing and NLU testing and flow testing, making sure that the intents trigger the right kind of responses and that kind of stuff.
Exactly that.
Yeah. So
exactly that. And I'm making it very transparent, so you can set up these test beds as they were and see those run, pass or fail, and publish after that.
Yeah. And so what's the difference then between your approach or similarities in your approach to kind of the responsible and guardrail based usage of generative AI then? What because there'll be a lot of people listening who are familiar with, unit testing and that kind of and like traditional NLU testing. And as people start to use generative AI and more large language models, whether it's for the kind of response generation, classification, contextual response generation, RAG implementations, there's a lot of different use cases popping up. But like, how is creative virtual thinking about providing those kind of guardrails and those capabilities from an LLM perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, we've been looking at these for it's probably about 2.5 years. Large language models. The head of our AI team was looking at these models for probably about 2.5 years. So, I guess we're another year into when this kind of emerged on the world, ChatGPT. I mean, so yeah, we've 3.5 years, nearly 4 years experience with these models. So, one of the first things we done when our customers, because what we got was, I guess, early 2023, so early last year. We got many of our enterprise customers sort of talking to us about this. What does this mean? How does it change things? And what we've done, I think it's actually the best thing I've ever done in the company, actually. But you can be, and the listeners can be the judge of this. But what we've done is straight away in those early months of 2023, we offered all of our customers and partners free proof of concepts around generative AI. So these were completely free. We put a lot of services in, a lot of support for all those customers that took us up on our offer. And quite quickly, we had over 10, getting up to about 15 quite meaty-sized projects.
Wow.
In many different areas, but all around generative AI. And what that enabled us to do was to really see early on what their concerns. I mean, some are obvious. You want to stop it hallucinating as much as you can. But it was much more detailed than that. So we had, use cases that were doing summarization, that were then having content and knowledge management wrapped around that. So although it was using generative AI to create the summaries, it wasn't using generative AI on the fly to serve customers or to serve employees. So that was a really obvious, I guess, use case. And we've actually deployed that for one of our award-winning, I must say, Australian accounting software business software companies in Australia. So that was one of the early ones. And then we had companies that were looking at email responses, which is very interesting, where it's even linking into sort of APIs, that proof of concept. And then many other sort of, more traditional conversational AI systems that were serving information to employees or through agent assist or to public-facing people. So many of those proof of concepts are still going today, still being reviewed by those customers. So let me get more specific about some of the things that we put in place. So first of all, what we did is, we created I guess we call it a workbench where organizations can feed in, so we can ingest, I know that's a term heavily used today, their contextual documents to the system. So these ultimately, I guess, are a level that people will understand them as these become RAG engines, but with a lot of controls that we've put in place around that. So one of the things that we do, for instance, is show the reference of the context document that you've ingested, the company's context document or documents. We show the reference points there. So you can see that it's actually a generative response based on the context documents that you've given it. We've also done a lot of work around the prompting, as you can imagine, to make sure it only answers questions. And when I say it, I do mean any of these models. I think we've tested 32 models to date. Wow. In terms of the generative capability for the sectors that we work in, we still find the OpenAI GPT-4, the most effective, but we are testing many other models, and we, through our platform, give companies the choice what ones they use. They can even use multiple models for different use cases. And so the referenceability back to those source documents was one of the key things. Quite a straightforward thing to do, really, but that was quite key. The other thing we've done is we enable this debug mode. So when our customers, these large enterprises that we work with, are testing these systems, they're able to see the contextual documents that it brought back and what further checks go on before it gives back an answer. So things like reformatting the user input to make it more friendly to work with these models is one thing that we have in place. Something called relevance checking that we've put in place. Again, these are all parallels with that regression testing workbench that we done 20 years ago around NLP. And the other bit we've got is some safety controls in there as well. And because a lot of our clients are in financial services, things like defining things that it mustn't talk about and saying when it can't answer the question as well. For instance, in financial services, in the UK, you can't give financial advice as in many other countries through these systems, and so putting those checks in as well. But what we've done is kind of exposed all of this through the user interface and through the test system, so that our customers, as they're testing these systems, can actually see exactly what's going on. When I say exactly, I mean not inside the large language model itself, of course, but all the checks that we're wrapping, all the guardrails that we're wrapping around it. Now, I must say that one of the other things that came out during these proof of concepts is the ability to use the models to match the intent to content that's already been signed off. And that's really transformed. We have native support for that now in our engine, and it's really transformed the way these systems are maintained and deployed. So, the previous method of having rules that need to be set up and maintained for matching intents, we use the models now themselves. And there's even open source local ones that you can deploy on premise for doing that piece. So it's not all about generative AI. I know that's the bit that's spoken about a lot, but these models offer more than that, of course. And so we're using that vectorization or word embedding, text embedding method to do the intent matching, and it's incredible. Even supporting multiple languages. And very low effort to deploy these systems and to maintain them as content gets added and changed. So that's another thing that came out quite early on, the importance of that. And I think the other big thing that we found, and this was a little bit surprising and feels a little bit counterintuitive in a way, was particularly we was having some workshops around these POCs with our customers, obviously, to get those learnings. And we always imagined, when we sat down and looked at this, we always imagined, because we had to ask ourselves some hard questions, what is our relevance in the world now that these systems are readily available to everyone? But we always imagined a blended approach between the kind of controlled or curated deterministic content, whatever you want to call it, and the generative AI side. But how do we blend those together? It's all very well saying, okay, we've got this blended approach, but how do we blend these together? And one of the really surprising things for me, at least anyway, in these early days of 2023, makes it sound like a long time ago, but it moves so quickly. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, forget about 3 or 5 year roadmaps. We're working to 3 to 5 week roadmaps, literally.
Sprint level roadmaps.
But on steroids. On steroids. So one of the things that we found was that in some cases, people when they're testing these systems and developing them, they want to actually capture the generative answer and turn that into a controlled answer. So we've created some really cool, slick workflow around that in our platform. That we call the Studio. We think it's a studio platform is a good way of describing it, because it's got lots of components and links into other systems. And so we've got this workflow around it. And I think that the other thing that kind of gets missed is not just that kind of testing. And you said not many systems have that today. And third parties have sprung up to deliver that. The other thing that's been really important to us over the years is having content and knowledge management capabilities around the conversational AI system. So we've always had that capability, and I would say it's never more important than it is today, because all of a sudden you're ingesting that content and generating answers from it. It needs to be spot on. Not that we want to hold all that information in our system. Quite often we're linking to other knowledge management systems, but being able to have some workflow process around that. Like if a contact center person's having a chat and our system's advising the agent or coming up with next best action, if they override that, then having feedback loops back into for someone to review that override that I've just done. I mean, we've always had kind of those capabilities in place, and that's really helping our large enterprise organizations that we work with and our partners, kind of really get to grips of putting these systems together. And then, the blended approach is like, okay, I may only have a few percentage of my answers delivered through generative AI today, but I know I'm going to be on this. I like to think about it as a destination AI. They're on this destination. I think we all agree ultimately where they're going to get to, and generative AI is going to, spatial computing and AI, all the Internet of Things, everything connected. I think we all understand robotics. Walking into a physical store, will be robotic, but you don't even need a store because you just need, the glasses or the contact lenses as they'll miniaturize into to walk into your virtual store just by imagining or kind of thinking about it, and it comes in front of you. But anyway. So we all know where it's going to go, but the question is, we find each customer, and it particularly gets interesting when you look at different sectors as well. They're all on a different timeline to get there. And so what we've done with our platform is just enable them to take their own journey, and they may start with all curated content today, which many of our customers are still on, and then start blending in some of this generative AI capability as they're allowed to, because in many cases they're not allowed to at the moment because of blocks within the organizations to not do generative AI at this stage. But anyway, it's another interesting subject.
Yeah, it is an interesting subject. And so it sounds as though your approach to generative AI, that kind of blended approach, so going back to the kind of testing thing, it sounds as though you have a series of kind of like, some prompt chaining going on, which is looking for things like relevance of the answer, abuse, toxicity, those kind of biases, typical kind of things. You have something in there which is helping classification, it sounds like, and then also a RAG implementation, but then a RAG implementation that also doesn't generate. It will basically take an answer, and if it's a relevant answer, basically cache that answer. So next time that query comes in, you're saving resources in terms of using the model to generate and do the vector-based lookup and that kind of stuff. Am I understanding that correctly? You hard code them after you've validated?
Both. So
right.
The system can just generate it on the fly, but what I'm saying is that a lot of our customers are not wanting to do that today in the public-facing systems.
Yeah,
it will change, of course. So our platform enables you to turn that on and be generative, now. But what we're finding is that they're using it mostly to capture those summaries or responses before and reviewing them in a workflow pattern.
Yeah.
Before giving those out. We just had our first. It's actually a university go live with generative AI though.
Right.
In terms of giving immediate generative AI answers, it's an internal system though. It's an internal system for staff. But it is obviously going that way, and we're just making sure our platform can take them on that journey, as it were, at the pace they want to set.
Yeah, definitely. And internal is usually a good place to start because you can mitigate the risk, and if it hallucinates slightly or whatever, then you've got less risk. In terms of
a human in the loop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In terms of the kind of the barriers, so there's a lot of barriers to implementing generative AI for businesses. You've got privacy and security. Where's the data going? Are you going to use our private data, train your models, all that kind of stuff? You've got the typical performance of the actual models themselves, which don't always perform consistently over time. You could give the same prompt 10,000 times. It might not give you the same responses 10,000 times. You might give the same 10,000 responses or prompts in 3 weeks' time, and the model's drifted, and therefore your responses are inconsistent again. So that's always a challenge. Hallucination is always inevitably a challenge, which we talk about all the time. Cost is a challenge. And so there's all of the skill sets, finding the right use cases. And there's lots of different challenges related to deploying this stuff. None of these seem to be challenges, for me at least, that prevent the implementation of this technology in the right situations. Like, you don't have to have it generating responses. That's just one part of what it can potentially do. You mentioned there kind of like what I call sort of contextual responses, which is where you will give a language model the hard-coded kind of handwritten copy you want it to say, but maybe you will feed it the line previous to that so that it understands the customer context. So if someone says something like, I want to change my address to their insurance company, you're not just saying, okay, I'll change your address. They might say something like, I need to take someone off the policy because they've died. So they've given you context there, and that response that comes back may want to be a little bit more kind of like empathy. I'm sorry for your loss. Let me sort this out for you. And you're not going to hand write all of that stuff because there's too many variables, you know. So like using it for those kind of areas where you're in more control of what the response is. You don't have to. The potential of generative AI is across the board, from the designing of the assistant to the classification and understanding layer. You don't always have to generate. So I'm wondering whether, you know, you were talking there about like barriers that customers have. Is it barriers from the perspective of purely just generating responses, or is it barriers from the perspective of the legal teams, the compliance teams? They just don't want generative AI anywhere near their systems.
Yeah, I think it's the stage you're at now. It's more the latter, I would say.
Right.
With the organisations we work with, I mean, we've had one financial services company. I think we run 3 parallel in different areas of their business proof of concepts. One of them was just about to go live. It all got signed off, and I guess in a way, you know, they were ahead of the game. This was a few months back now, in the sense that they didn't have. I think they set up 2 teams initially. They called it, but that's just because there was a big organisation. You know, those things sort of happen. A responsible AI team and an ethical AI team. They come together. And that team we're working with now, looking at those projects. So I think that, you know, we had a situation where, you know, the top of these organisations was saying, look, you know, we need to deploy this. We can see the efficiencies, we can see the improvements on customer experience. You know, we can see the capability of these being sales assistants. You just touched on a really interesting capability of the models to kind of do these more dynamic flows and collect you know, attributes like your slots or slot filling or entity extraction. You know, all those things we've talked about for many years. These models are very capable of doing, and we've got some of those things working in our platform. So we're at the top of the organisation saying we need to get on this. We need to do it. And then we had the business teams, you know, working with companies like ourselves, you know, Creative Virtual, to kind of put together proof of concepts that are ready to go. But then in the background, you've had the legal and compliance people saying, actually, we've got a new team that's set up just to look at how we're going to be deploying AI. So I think the stage you're at now is that we see a lot of projects at the stage of being reviewed by these ethical or responsible AI teams, and I think that will stay in place for a little while. But of course, you know, they'll start to move ahead with deployment, especially on the agent assist side. It makes perfect sense, as we were talking about earlier, for these systems to be generating answers and advice, alerts. I know we're doing some really interesting work with some customers, listening to conversations. That could be voice conversations, or it could be, say, through web chat, live chat, and actually alerting people, alerting the agents that they need to, you know, be careful because, you know, this is maybe a financial hardship case. I know in Australia there's, you know, kind of rules around, you know, how you must behave as a contact center agent if there's a financial hardship type situation. So you know, they have to follow quite strict guidelines there. And the AI component to that is key. You know, you can't expect those people to, well, for one, you've got to retain all that knowledge, or at the very least, you've got to be able to look it up in real time where you've got that person connected to you. Yeah. And so having the AI tool being a buddy, an assistant, someone sitting on the shoulder of the agent and looking out for them to make sure that they're answering the right way, to make sure they're compliant legally. Yeah, I think it's absolutely, and this is where we're seeing. So when I say blockers, obstacles, hurdles, one of the things that we are seeing is those use cases on the agent side starting to come to fruition now, which I guess, you know, it's kind of obvious in a way because, as you say, you've got that human in the loop there. But that will just filter through, I believe, to the other more public-facing cases. You know, with the guardrails we've put in place, you know, we've been with our testing. It's, you know, virtually, or, you know, almost impossible to get it to not answer in the correct way, or to certainly to hallucinate. Anyway, I mean, the worst case you get is it using maybe an answer, if you try really hard, from its wider corpus. Right. Training, you know, if you put them in place in the right way, it's well covered in the media because it makes an interesting story. But the hallucinating bit is, that's dealt with, I believe, you know, in these commercial systems that we're that we're deploying. But yeah, I say worst cases it might give an answer, you know. But again, you have to try really hard for it to do that. That's not in the context documents. But as I said, with the reference point bit though, that gives it you know, more, I guess, surety that it's given it from one of the ingested documents.
Yeah. Do you think that like when it comes to AI and large language models and generative AI, it's only generative AI that seems to have given rise to these concerns, legislative concerns, AI responsibility and ethics committees being set up within organizations. It seems to be that we've had AI for a long time. We've had machine learning for a long time. It's only now because of the generative capabilities that companies seem to have woke up to it. Now, if you look at most of the legislation that's being proposed, most of the legislation is actually not necessarily for like you as creative virtual or me as an implementer or whatever. It's mainly for the kind of model providers to be more ethical, be more responsible, be more transparent. And so yes, it's important that they do that. And part of the, you know, there's obviously like the copyright and the privacy concerns and all that kind of stuff. But like the whole existential threat of AI argument, I can believe it less and less. And when you have a platform seemingly like it sounds Creative Virtual is, and plenty of others have this approach where you have a very diligent approach to implementing large language models, you're only implementing them in a very specific use case, and you're not throwing everything to a large language model. You're bringing the model into an established, I suppose, traditional rule-based platform. You likely Creative Virtual, like many others, has context management and memory and state that you manage independent of a large language model. The responses of a large language model go through the platform first, and therefore it's not you're just having a conversation with a model. So all of that stuff definitely reduces the risk. So the question is, like, do you think that these responsible AI teams, ethical AI teams, not that they don't have their place, because absolutely you don't want to be irresponsible, you don't want to introduce bias into your conversations and things like that. So I'm not suggesting that they are kind of not warranted. I just wonder whether or not it's a reaction to a lot of the media hype around AI, and that media hype around AI really is targeting the model builders, not those that are using the models and the output of the models with more controls and guardrails to deploy solutions. So do you think that the approach from businesses to be cautious and risk averse and let's not touch generative AI, do you think that's kind of warranted, or do you think that's a knee-jerk reaction given the bit of the frenzy that's been going on recently?
Yeah, before you mentioned the press, I was going to say that. I mean, it's the frenzy. I don't think they're warranted today. Those blockers, those obstacles in many of the cases that we see today. But you're right. The media and the frenzy has created that fear. You know, you have to create that trust. And let's face it. I mean, you know, there is an obligation on companies like us though to make sure, just like we did 20 years ago, those guardrails are in place, because we're talking about brand reputation and what value do you put on that. You know, and whilst someone in a contact center might answer a question wrong, the day that the AI system does it, it's everywhere. And it's a bit like the security breaches, you know, that brand reputation. And I think that's what we concentrate on, because, you know, as a company, you know, there's similar companies that can do similar stuff to us, show in a demonstration, say to a new prospect, the art of the possible. And it's incredible what you can do. I mean, we can show some absolutely amazing systems using unattended RPA technology to go and get personalized information in the background while the agents are carrying on having a conversation. I mean, you know, we can go on all the API connectivity. So, you know, you can create, and we have created, you know, linking in real time voice transcription and prompting agents with next best action, sales opportunities, compliance we've already spoken about. So all these things are kind of possible today, but we don't start there as a company. We start with how do we use our experience? And again, we talk a lot about technology, but it kind of winds my CTO up a little bit. But I say to him, actually, what's more important is the experience that we have as a company than the technology. But anyway, but so we bring that to those organizations and say, let's start with the brand and the reputation that you've got to protect. That trust, control, experience that we can bring with our people and technology to address the business issues that you're trying to solve and the outcomes that you're trying to create. And actually, quite often, I must say, there is a non-AI bit. It sounds boring. I know we're talking about AI and generative AI today around conversational AI, but I think you touched on it, before as well when you was giving some of your summary, Kane. It's the stuff. I don't want to call it old because that's not sexy, is it? But it's the stuff, like replacing a credit card, for an example, for one of our financial service organizations that we work with. That's a very rigid process, a very rigid decision tree or flow, whatever you want to call it. And they don't want the AI or the large language models, whatever, getting in the way of that. They have a very direct process and very direct controls around that particular use case. And so there are things that will live outside and continue to live outside of the AI component, for some time, maybe forever, who knows? But so it's about using it in the right situation. Like you said, we're kind of wrapping around the more traditional ways of doing things, with these models and just bringing them into to when it makes sense, but always starting with that kind of trust, control, bringing the experience and making sure that the first thing we're doing is around that the brand reputation, because I think that's the key thing. So I know what you're saying. It's on the models, but it's we see it as our responsibility to make sure that companies that we work with are protected on those things, and sometimes that means advising them on the right models to use as well.
Yeah.
Where is the servers located? What country? All that stuff comes into play.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and that's fair enough. You have got a responsibility to make sure that the models are used in the right way, and you can do that a lot by how you design the platform and how you create the mental model for the person using the platform, and you make it so that they do kind of deploy it responsibly. But for me, is it responsible AI, or is it just good design to not have your large language model go off the rails? I just view that as good design practice. The Chevrolet example, the DPD example, all these poor examples. It's not that the company's been implementing irresponsible AI. It's just that the systems have been designed really poorly, and maybe haven't had the technology behind it that's allowed them to design it and implement it effectively. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because in those cases, I'm sure they've just turned on some, I don't know for sure, but I imagine that they've turned on some sort of RAG engine without having these sorts of controls in place. But you do say an interesting point, because at the platforms like what we have, this AV Studio platform, you're absolutely right. It's getting, even when it uses the large language model, it's bringing that back into our engine, as we call it. And then, we're able to do things from that. A good example of that is customizing the response or optimizing the response for the particular channel or business area within an organization. So these are attributes like business area and channel that we've added in our system, since day one. And they're really applicable today, because what comes back from the models still has to have some massaging before it can create a really good customer or employee or agent experience. So there is that element to it. I mean, the simple case is just putting links in today. The models don't really come back with a good way of providing good links to click on, and so we do that. But it goes further than that. It's creating rich user experiences with videos, with carousels if you're in a messenger type app. So we have that layer that you touched on earlier. We wrap around the model to create those experiences, and I would say that the user experience is still kind of the key thing. I mean, I think the problem I have today, over the years, there's been avatars, not avatars, not avatars. It all depends, and depends on maybe sometimes even geography and culture and market sector. Is it entertainment? Is it financial? Is it whatever? I kind of think it's like that in a way, that you've got to really, kind of understand what the customer experience is that you're trying to deliver. The persona comes into it. And then once you've got that, what content are we using? What security controls are we putting in place? So there's a number of layers to delivering these systems, but it has to start with that. What is the customer experience you're trying to deliver? Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I think that the whole like I view it as, I've mentioned this a few times, which is that there's a craze going on at the moment, which is like an AI first craze. So everything's got to be AI first. And when people think about AI first, typically what they mean is that any problem we have can be solved with AI. And so that's the first solution that we're going to think about when it comes to trying to solve a problem. AI has got to be shoved in there. Whereas when I think of AI first, actually, when I look at deployments of what I would consider AI first, actually, the AI first element is a literal AI first, which is that the AI system is the first thing that a customer contacts when they do contact a business. And then you will decide, based on what the intent is, what the best, most appropriate way of solving that journey is. And if it's an AI solution, then great. If it's not the end of the world. Some journeys are better off being resolved in a mobile app where you can authenticate and send photos. Some journeys are better resolved in messaging because it's asynchronous and it's not important right now. I'll deal with it later, and so I've got the flexibility to, deal with it when I can. Some journeys are better off being solved over the phone. If it's a bereavement or whatever it might be, then maybe you want some empathy and you want. So it's like there's different ways of solving. And then even in the journey, if it's a chatbot, for example, within that there are certain components in there that deal with certain interaction requirements better than language does. Like
exactly,
yeah, you're going to use like a date picker to select a date because it's more effective. If you want to do something like validate a postcode over voice, then it might be better to switch to another channel because it's quite difficult to get the speech recognition to work properly. So you kind of just need to use the tools that you have, knowing that AI is one of those tools, to then put all of those technologies together to create the best experience. Is that kind of to your point? And this is what we've kind of been trying to get at for the last kind of couple of years, really, which is that because we have AI, doesn't mean that we need to ram it end-to-end AI everything. We need to recognize what it's good for and use it to power the most effective experience, whether it's an AI-first experience or not,
Yeah, I think you now on the head, making sure it's all joined up as well. We've got some interesting kind of things going, use cases going, people think that, there's all these APIs that you can connect into in the back end, but some of these large organizations don't have that capability today. So this is where the RPA technology comes in. So we may call like a robotic process automation technology to go away and just grab something by just driving some screens of an internal system to come back and help the users. So, we have companies like that exist today. But it's all about, a lot of the work we're doing today on the agent assist side is linking into the most popular contact center systems, because we can then join up that full journey from voice to digital, back to voice, even SMS. We've got some great use cases for a couple of retailers where you phone in, you go for like an IVR type of experience, and you get the option though, say it's like a common thing, like a warranty return or you're registering a product, whatever, a chasing up delivery. You get the option to get an SMS to then chat to a conversational AI system completely seamlessly handed over with all the context of what you phoned for and the information it gathered through the IVR, but then can then go back to a chat session, a web chat session, if you want to, if it can't resolve it. So I think that kind of channel shifting and making sure it's the best experience for that particular person on whatever device they want to use. To me, that's a much more bigger thing today, and it always has been than just the AI bit, as you say. We bring it in for where it's needed.
Yeah, there's a really great book which I talk about a lot, which is The Effortless Experience by Matt Dixon. And that's kind of one of the things there. The first thing that most people say when you suggest something like, well, if people phone and it's this use case, then send them a text and do it that way, is, oh, well, they're just going to drop out. They're not going to bother. And it's like, well, drop out and do what? Usually they'll drop out of the website and then call you. If they call you and they need to get something resolved, then that theory doesn't hold. And the research in that Effortless Experience book suggests that actually, if you can say to a customer, you will get your issue resolved if you do it this way, then they're far more likely to actually do it, and they do actually do it. It's not. I think there's a fallacy around customers want issues to be resolved in the channel of choice, and that's like a big thing around this whole omni-channel craze or trend or whatever. It's like we need to be on every channel and we need to solve every issue in the channel it arises in. When actually that's not strictly the case, because people will go to the channel that the actual issue can be resolved in, because not every issue can be resolved in every channel. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. And I think the whole concept of channels is just going to disappear. You're just going to, it's going to feel natural in the way that you communicate as a person, whether that's through voice on your phone, in an app, or, whatever social media platform you're on. I mean, organizations have to just make that, to your point, effortless and seamless as well. You don't even have to think about the channel. I think this concept of a channel is disappearing. And I think, one of the, what I wanted to say as well about the kind of sales area is that, I think one of the most interesting areas for us is using this for sales. We've had that abandonment rate, was it 2/3 or whatever, since the internet, really. And I think this technology's got an absolutely great way of dealing with those situations. And we're working with a travel company at the moment, and I think the terms we're using is like sales advocacy or advocacy for in the sales process. So, recreating that experience where you walk into, say, a travel agent and you sit down planning a trip, and the person that you're planning it with has experienced it, or their colleague jumps in and says, "Oh, actually, I was there. There's a really good restaurant there, just near the beach," whatever. And this technology can scale and have the capability to do that, to give you an experience that is similar to that. And I think, and again, that's they're very innovative projects, I think, that we're working on with the technology. And AI does come into that, because you've got to be able to kind of ingest lots of information to be able to do that and to make it scalable. And I think that's the other thing that this technology offers. And it's kind of the more boring part of it, really, when you think about scalability. But that's where we're seeing it when you're trying to do kind of this type of thing. I mean, a classic case is like, we've had a chatbot conversational AI system with a company. It's can get about 1,000 intents, and they had like 4,000 odd wiki pages that were really long. Each page was really long, and they wouldn't have really considered putting that into their system without this technology enabling it. So it becomes an enabler to get scale as well. And I think that sometimes kind of gets missed in the mix of, okay, this is a generative answer.
Yeah, that's true. I think the whole kind of infrastructure and scalability and deployment options and management and operations and analytics and all that kind of stuff, it's like, I find it fairly sexy, but not everyone does. But it's the old kind of adage of, my dad used to always say, if any golf fans out there, drive in for show and put in for dough. So I don't know if you're a golf fan or not, but you can hit the ball a mile, and it doesn't matter if you can't put it in the hole at the end. So the boring stuff that actually matters is all of that stuff, But the sales use case is interesting because obviously one of the big areas for this technology historically, regardless of generative AI or large language models, has been conversational AI in customer service, customer experience. Absolutely. Something goes wrong, let's deal with it. There is emerging, and I think maybe it could be related to the technology, could be related to the renewed enthusiasm around the technology, could be related to businesses that have got experience in customer service and customer experience, and now they're being a bit more ambitious and moving into sales. But it's one of the top areas where disruption is likely to occur, according to McKinsey. They found those top 5 areas where generative AI is likely to disrupt most often, and it's basically customer service, marketing, sales, and software development, basically the top 4. And so it seems to be an area that's getting interest. I haven't seen a great deal of deployments in sales use cases. No. I've seen some. I know there's a company called, I think it's called Nibble, that does a lot of stuff around negotiating and stuff like that. And basically most of the conversation is around haggling with a customer to try and get a deal on a price, which is quite an interesting use case. But yeah, I think the whole sales angle, the marketing angle is definitely worth exploring, because fundamentally, all customers with all businesses go through the same steps anyway, don't they? They try and find a product, they buy a product, they wait for it to be delivered or turned on, they use it, they have a problem using it, and they need to contact you, or they cancel it. There's like every company does exactly the same sort of stuff fundamentally, and all the activity around AI has been on that latter end of the journey. We've got the purchase, and now it's about loyalty. Whereas I do think that there is huge opportunities to turn, rather than focusing on loyalty, which I do still think is hugely important, but there's a lot of opportunity here for revenue generation use cases, isn't there?
Absolutely, and that's some of the projects that we're currently working on, and can't wait to bring those out. And so we're looking forward to that. And I think that that's really what's happening today, is that people are now starting to imagine things because of that scale that they can create that wasn't possible before. I mean, you think about the spatial computing situation. where you can have an augmented reality experience of walking into a virtual branch or a virtual shop with product experts at hand that can answer every single question that you can throw at it about a particular product or service. I mean, this is where that's what I mean about destination AI. I mean, I think no one would argue that's where we're going. It's just how quickly we get there. But you can't deliver that experience without some technology that can scale. And it's not all about artificial intelligence. A lot of the traditional methods are also going to be applicable. But yeah, but it has to scale from to be able to do that.
Yeah. Do you see a difference in how different? Obviously, you've alluded to Australia a couple of times. Do you see a difference in how different geographies are approaching this? Like, we've had companies on here from various parts of the world. We've had Gupshup on here, very big in India, and we know Yellow AI are very kind of big in India and stuff like that. For them, it's all messaging. Everything's messaging first. You've got companies in South America, it's all WhatsApp. Everything's WhatsApp crazy. Europe and America seems to be more chat and voice and stuff like that. So maybe there's a difference in terms of the cultural usage of technology. Is there any difference in your experience in terms of how businesses are approaching it, or their levels of understanding or levels of ambition, or any differences geographically in terms of what you see at the moment?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we operate in all those areas that you just mentioned today. The US is a big market for us, as is APAC. We have customers in India as well. So we do experience it, and it's interesting. What we're seeing quite a lot of innovation going on, in the APAC area today. And particularly, linking up the contact center with for years, we've had the silos in these organizations, the big enterprises, where the contact center sits separately from the marketing and the digital areas. But we're seeing some quite good innovation around those areas where those are coming together much more. So yeah, I think APAC's. I know from us from a company perspective is one of the sort of fastest growing sectors for us at the moment, and where a lot of the innovation's going on. But I think UK, Europe, and the US are there too. So. But it just seems at this moment in time we're seeing quite a lot of innovation going on there. And I talked to some of the big partners that we work with, and I hear that that's, in fact, I'm on a call just this morning with an Australian, one of our big partners there, and they're developing a digital coach for workforce, which I think's a good term, a digital coach. Using the technologies that we've just been talking about today, but I know that's a big government project, but it's actually linked up with the UK and US governments around military, Ministry of Defence type stuff, and vessels and things, and so quite an interesting project, with kind of maintenance of parts and lots of manuals. So that's where, again, the scale and where this technology can help. But the interesting thing about that one is that they're seeing the sort of Australian market as a test for it, and then looking to roll it out elsewhere. So I don't know, maybe it's a little bit anecdotal, my evidence, but I'm certainly seeing projects starting there with a view of rolling them out. Once they've proven their success, as it were.
Yeah, I've heard the same things in the past, actually, about those areas being used as almost test beds for wider stuff. What do you think about the UK? So for AI adoption generally, most of the companies that I've spoken with in the last few months, probably the last quarter or so, their estimations, and it's fairly similar from what I can sort of see observationally, is the UK market's pretty slow to adopt this kind of stuff. Not as much activity, certainly, as perhaps the US and maybe other parts of Europe. That's the general feedback I'm getting in terms of the UK companies being a bit slow to adopt this kind of stuff. Would you concur with that, or are you experiencing something different?
No, I would agree. I would concur with that. I think it is. I wouldn't say it's slower than Europe, actually.
Right.
I would put those together. But it's certainly. I think it's going to change quickly. I think the tipping point will come. But I think you're right. I think there does seem to be more reluctance, in our view, in the UK and Europe to to move forward, I tend to be looking at what else goes on in the world first. The US is almost, I mean, the US media had a lot of early coverage of bad examples of this, which I think slowed them down a bit as well. And maybe that's what happens. Maybe it is directly related to those press and those early events that happened with hallucinations. Maybe there is a direct correlation between that and where we're seeing most activity in the markets today.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it didn't bode well for Amazon with Alexa, if you remember, when there was those conversations about how Amazon was sending conversations to the Philippines to be analysed and stuff like that, and people weren't aware that was in the terms of service and this, that, and the other. And so there was loads of stories over the years with Alexa where it was like people were realising that it was doing stuff they weren't happy with, and it just generally ended up kind of eroding a bit of confidence. And I don't necessarily think that's the reason why Alexa has become shelved in many households or stuck in the drawer. But I think it was part of it. And so perhaps that's kind of it. But I mean, for me, like, this technology is, and I've always believed this is the whole point of doing this podcast and having this company, is I absolutely fundamentally believe that this technology is better for people. It's a better way of interacting. It's a more natural way of interacting, far more efficient for businesses to deal with if they do things effectively. And I always say the way that we live, work, and get things done can be improved. So the way that we have in our households, the way we interact with our family and friends, the way that we do our day-to-day stuff can be improved. When we go to work, actually doing your job, the processes that you do and the things you have to do, I think can be improved using this technology. And then getting things done from a customer perspective is all the things we've been talking about. Buying a product, getting support for a product, leaving a company, dealing with anything you need to do while have this relationship. It's like, it's fundamental. And for businesses, when I mentioned earlier on about that AI first approach, being the AI being the first thing that you touch whenever you contact any business, I think that approach is, I can't find any holes in it. That you contact the company on any channel, the AI is the first thing that responds. It understands what it is that you're aiming to do. It then sends you to the place where you can get that done, or it'll do it for you there and then in channel if that's the right use case. And then it just sends it back to your people in cases where it can't handle it or cases where it's better served by people. And I think the scalability that contact centers and businesses will get in general is huge, because you won't have to recruit quite as much as you scale. You're making better work life better for your staff, even with agent assist tools and stuff like that. Like all the reports I've seen is suggesting that all of the agents are overwhelmed, they're overworked, they're underpaid, there's attrition through the roof, they find it very difficult to recruit. And so it's like businesses have got real challenges. This technology can absolutely solve it. It's been proven to be able to solve it. Just because it's generative AI that adds a slight curveball for the last 18 months. But now it's at a place where Creative Virtual and others have got the solutions and tools to make it work. And so now we're back at, I think, parity to where we were before, only we've got better performance. I just can't wrap my head around, maybe you can shed some light on this, I can't wrap my head around why every business on the planet isn't jumping at this with both hands and both feet and going crazy to get it done. I don't understand. Maybe you can shed some light on that.
Well, I think it's, as I said, I think we're in a funny state at the moment, and there will become a tipping point. But to me, it's kind of a really fundamental issue, and that is that it's amazing. I find it amazing how many people in large organizations today, and this is a global thing, really don't understand the technology. So I think we are in that educational. We find ourselves, as in many cases, and I know there's companies that are sprung up just to do this piece, consultancy, and some of that consultancy is quite basic in terms of getting the understanding across of what it can deliver. So I think once that's there, and I know you're doing that, Kane, in your in your work. And Creative Virtual and other similar companies I know are doing the same thing. I do think it's an educational thing, and making sure that the awareness is there, and plugging things together like we touched on earlier to create those examples that you just mentioned. It's easy in many cases, but I think we've got to start with making sure people understand the risks. I mean, I just like to tell you this really interesting case we had just recently. Again, it's a travel company, and we are just about to go live with a generative AI use case there. And one of their senior executives, very excited about it. When we had it in testing, said, "Let me test it." and he asked a lot of questions, all good. And one of them was my son is 18 when we go on a cruise. Can I pre-purchase the drinks package for him?
Right.
He's 18 on the day he goes on the cruise. Now, interesting question. So this is in a country where 18 is the legal age. And he actually tested their other systems. He called the contact center, and the agent actually didn't know and said they'd get back to him.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
The AI said, yes, as long as he's 18 and he brings, our system, which was using generative AI in this case, actually, based on the content we ingested from their website and their documents they gave us, their policy documents and everything. It said, yes, as long as he's 18, he brings proof of ID. Great, seemingly a great answer.
Yeah.
But he went crazy. It's actually the wrong answer. But when we traced it back, it was because their policy document that we'd ingested was incorrect.
Right.
That's very interesting, isn't it? That the people can get it wrong or not know, but as soon as the AI does it, it's a big issue. And I think we need to get over that. I think there's a lot of that still. So that was a good story in many senses. But I also think it kind of touches on quite a few issues of where we are today, though. So the other thing why people are not jumping on it today as much as you'd expect is because their content's just not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, these solutions highlight the content and knowledge problems. There's normally multiple sources. We're working on projects, another interesting use case, comparing different sources of content that the company uses and saying, what's the difference? What's correct? What's the gaps between those two things? So some of it's policy documents, some of it's customer-facing documents that's been buried down on a website, maybe in an FAQ section for years and years and years. And all of a sudden we're ingesting it and it's starting pumping out generative answers. And in many cases, they're wrong because the content and knowledge is wrong. So again, it's a bit of a boring thing, but the bread and butter content knowledge management aspects need to be covered off. And I actually think, so my view is it's understanding. There's a big understanding, a big awareness, a big training issue, education issue needed within these organizations. And there's also a big cleanup exercise needed on content and knowledge for these to be deployable for real, because all of a sudden those inaccuracies, inconsistencies, conflicts even, really, really in the spotlight when you deploy this technology.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. That is a really, really great point. That I think I think people underestimate that as well, which is that just hook our website up to it and throw a large language model at it and job done. Where it's like
exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So I often get asked. Well, I don't get asked this, but people often say it's early days, and sometimes it kind of, and I think people say that because they maybe want to make themselves feel better, or maybe they can appreciate that, the way that their company might be doing things is not necessarily, or could be improved or whatever. But I hear it all the time, it's early days. And I kind of think to myself, well, yeah, technically it's early days if you expand time out a sufficient length. But when we were, I started this stuff with Alexa skills, and it was like that should be the future. Then it didn't quite happen, and then it's like chatbots and contact center automation was the future, and then for whatever reason that didn't seem to get adopted as readily or as I expected it to. And then now it's generative AI is the future, and it's like not every organization is doing that because they're risk averse or whatever. And so it's like, for me, it feels as though it's not early days whatsoever, and we've been doing this for 6 years to educate people about how to do this, educate about the capabilities of the technology, encourage them and train them in how to do this stuff properly. And so sometimes it's like, yes, I feel and I appreciate that for some people it's early days, but at the same time it's like, when does this really kind of take off? And maybe it is kind of now, but like, from your perspective, 21 years in, does it feel like early days for you? Does it feel like you've been like, because a lot of the stuff we've been talking about doesn't really change. Even with a traditional NLU based chatbot, you still have to have your content in order.
Exactly.
You can't put bullshit in there. And so, and then even with large language models, you still have to rely on some of the old technology, not old technology, but like some of that more traditional rule based stuff. Because as you said earlier on, business processes are business processes. They don't deviate. If you want to make a payment, this is how you make a payment. If you want to change your address, this is how you change your address. These things don't change, and so you'd have to have controls and rules around it. And so How do you think? Do you perceive this as it's early days, or do you think, come on, world, get on with it already? We've been saying the same thing for the last 21 years.
It reminds me of a conversation I used to have every year, or maybe we used to have it every month actually with a colleague of mine back in the early days. I think next year is going to be the year for this.
Yeah.
It always happens slower though, doesn't it? Than you would expect in many ways, and there's lots of reasons for that. I mean, you think about the banking industry and those platforms on the back ends that they have. I mean, some of those are mainframe systems.
Yeah.
I was talking to one of our partner companies that we work with. Struggling to get COBOL developers to maintain those systems.
God.
That's exactly. But that's what we're faced with. I mean, they're actually updating the platform and making it a lot more updated with APIs and things, but not replacing it. So it's quite a lot of big banks and financial institutions use these type of applications. So I think that's one thing. But look at voice. People said voice is going to be great. It's going to be used everywhere. I mean, it is now, isn't it? But it took many years for that voice recognition to get to a point where it was that was always going to be just around the corner, and it took many years. And I think there's a lot of parallels we could draw from that. To me, it's about. I think you described it well when you said about kind of those processes and how they can all be linked up, and how AI can be a part of that. Whether it's advising an agent or advising the customer directly. I think what's going to make the difference, but I think that is starting to happen now, is that everything is API based, apart from the systems I just talked about on the back end. But there's RPAs to get around that in many cases. But it's much more a world of just plug in and play in the cloud mostly, but not always, of course. And I think that's people talk about the AI bit of it, but I think it's that with the convergence of everything being microservices or API based, we've re-engineered our whole platform into making it microservices. So you could just take bits of it, plug it in here, plug it in there, and I think there's a big change going on. What's the term? I don't hear it so much these days, but started to hear it a couple of years ago about the move towards the composable enterprise, which I love that term, because I think to me that's where we're going with all this, is that we can compose the enterprise we want with. Everyone used to speak about best of breed, but you do want to pick the best part here, the best part there, plug it together, and that's what I think is going to make the big difference. So to answer your question, I don't think it's just on the AI side. I think it's the APIs, the composable enterprise. There's all very well, these model companies, the big companies, the Microsoft, the Amazons, the Google, saying, wow, we've got all these APIs now, you can connect in there. But if your internal systems can't do that, then that's a big obstacle, of course, to doing that. So I do think there's still a way to go before every organization says, that's it, we're there, we can do it all. But I think it's much more than just about the models. But I do think we're there.
Yeah.
Are we getting there, Ken?
Yeah, I agree. And the limiting factor is the business's ability to be able to do it. And you hear a lot about, I'm sure you've had this with clients where, we're not going to do anything with AI now because we're just about to re-platform our CRM, or we're not going to do anything with such and such now because we're just going to move to the cloud. And it's like,
I know. We had that conversation the other day with someone. I said, well, hang on, and that gets me thinking about the educational bit, actually, because and the awareness and just being aware of what this technology can enable, because in many cases they don't need to do those projects, certainly not in the same way, if they really put the AI at the forefront of what they're considering. But that example you just gave, I hear that quite often, just the other day, and that's the thing that convinces me. We're still not there on the education and awareness bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So we need to keep on doing what we're doing, Kane.
We need to keep on doing it. Yeah, we do. More conversations like this. I genuinely think that's the key. Basically, is the more conversations we can have, the more people like yourself that can share their experience, and ultimately, all it takes is a rising tide raises all ships, isn't it? And so, one organization at a time, or one individual at a time. An idea sparks and it changes the way that they approach things, and they can make a difference. And so conversations like this are brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. Go on.
I was just going to say to that point about the conversation and about making those connections with people, we always saw it as machines in the mix of that. And when I started the company, the tagline we came up with was the science of conversation. And I think that's just so true, because it is a conversation. We need to make it more scientific to create those efficiencies and the better experiences. But there is an art to it still as well, and there is a human element to it as well, and it's that mix, I think, that where we're heading. But yeah, we need to carry on having conversations like this to get that message out there.
Definitely. Well, Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending your time with me and sharing your insights. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much. Where can people go to?
The opportunity.
Nice one. Where can people go to reach out or to learn more about Creative Virtual?
To our website, creativevirtual.com, or they can drop me a line directly, chris@creativevirtual.com.
Perfect. Nice one. Thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate that. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll be speaking to who have we got? We've got another podcast coming up on Thursday, which is with Tomato AI, actually, and that's all about using voice technology to how can I say this? Mask accents, if that makes sense. So if you think about Chris, this might be useful for you actually. If you think about those companies that offshore a lot of stuff, and sometimes, as politically correct as we can be, sometimes certain people have certain accents that are more difficult for other people in other geographies to understand. What Tomato AI does essentially is it takes any accent, and with your exact tone, your exact voice sounds exactly like you, they basically kind of strip out all of the accent to create this almost like not monotone, but like a genericized voice. And the idea being is that anyone, anywhere in the world, as long as they speak that language, should be able to better understand the person on the other end of the phone, which is mind-blowing.
Being from the East End of London. Yeah, being from the East End of London, I often drop my H's off of words, so I'll put it to the test and see if it can stick those on automatically for me instead of me having to work at it.
Exactly. We're good. Thank you, Chris, so much. Thank you all for joining me. Cheers. And we'll see you.